Hello, everyone, and welcome back. What if I told you that one of the most recognizable faces from Pawn Stars has been quietly going through a series of events that almost no one fully understands? Not the headlines, not the rumors, but the real story behind it all. Because the truth is, when most people think of Corey Harrison, also known as Big Hoss, they picture confidence, success, and a man destined to inherit a legendary family business. But what they don't see is everything that's been happening behind the scenes. And honestly, almost nobody was paying attention when things first started to change. Corey wasn't just another reality TV personality. He was born directly into the legacy of the gold and silver pawn shop, a business that had already been running long before cameras ever showed up. From a young age, he was surrounded by deals, negotiations, and the constant pressure of living up to the Harrison name. While other kids were figuring out what they wanted to do with their lives, Corey was already working inside the shop, learning the business, making mistakes, being corrected, pushed, tested. And if you watched closely in the early seasons of Pawn Stars, you could already see it. He wasn't treated like a celebrity. He was treated like someone who had something to prove. Especially by his father, Rick Harrison. Their relationship, while often entertaining on screen, was far more intense than most viewers realized. Rick didn't hand anything to Corey. In fact, he did the opposite. He constantly challenged him, questioned his decisions, and pushed him harder than anyone else in the shop. And then there was his grandfather, Richard Harrison, known by fans simply as the Old Man. He represented something even bigger: tradition, authority, old-school discipline. For Corey, growing up in that environment meant one thing: there was no room for weakness. Every mistake was noticed, every decision mattered, and every day felt like a test he couldn't afford to fail. But here's what most people didn't realize: that pressure didn't just build character, it also built something else. Stress, frustration, and over time, it started to show. Even though Corey was becoming more confident on screen, more involved in big deals, and more respected within the shop, behind that progress, there were signs that things weren't as stable as they looked. Because carrying a family legacy isn't just about success, it's about expectation. And expectation can slowly become something much heavier, something that doesn't turn off when the cameras stop rolling. By the time Pawn Stars became one of the most popular reality shows in the world, Corey had already spent years trying to prove himself, not just to viewers but to his own family. And ironically, the fame that was supposed to make everything easier only made things more complicated. Suddenly, every argument, every mistake, every moment of doubt wasn't private anymore. It was entertainment. Millions of people were watching him grow, struggle, and sometimes fail in real time. And while that made for great television, it also meant that Corey didn't have the luxury of figuring things out quietly. Everything was public, everything was judged, and everything stayed online forever. But even with all of that, nothing could have prepared him for what was coming next. Because just as Corey was beginning to step into a more serious role inside the business, just as he was getting closer to becoming the person everyone expected him to be, life hit him in a way that no amount of experience, pressure, or fame could prepare him for. A moment that didn't just affect the show, but changed the entire Harrison family forever.
After years of pressure, expectation, and living under constant public attention, things inside the Harrison family reached a turning point that no one could ignore. Because while Pawn Stars continued to grow in popularity, something much more serious was happening behind the scenes. In 2018, the man who held the entire foundation of the family together was gone. Richard Harrison, the Old Man, passed away. And for many viewers, it felt like the end of an era. But for Corey, it was something much deeper than that. This wasn't just a television personality disappearing from the screen. This was his grandfather, a man who had been part of his life since the very beginning, a figure who represented authority, structure, and tradition, even when that meant being tough, strict, and sometimes brutally honest. Growing up, Corey didn't always agree with him. In fact, like many young people under pressure, he pushed back, he argued, he made mistakes. But at the same time, that presence was always there. And when it suddenly wasn't, it left a silence that couldn't be filled. What many people don't realize is that when someone like the old man is gone, it doesn't just create emotional pain, it shifts responsibility. Suddenly, things change, expectations move, and roles are forced to evolve, whether you're ready or not. For Corey Harrison, this moment marked the beginning of a completely different kind of pressure, because now it wasn't just about proving himself anymore. Now it was about stepping up, taking on more responsibility inside the gold and silver pawn shop, being taken seriously not just as Big Hoss, but as a future leader. And from the outside, it looked like he was doing exactly that. He became more involved in negotiations, more confident in decisions, more assertive when dealing with customers. But internally, things weren't that simple. Because while Corey was trying to grow into this new role, he was also dealing with something personal that had been building for years, something that had nothing to do with business: his health. For a long time, Corey struggled with his weight. And this wasn't just about appearance, it was about survival. Doctors warned him about serious health risks, the kind that don't wait, the kind that don't give second chances. And at some point, he realized that if he didn't make a drastic change, everything else he was working toward might not even matter. So he made a decision that would completely transform his life. He underwent weight loss surgery. Now, from the outside, people saw the results, the dramatic transformation, the slimmer appearance, the confidence boost. And for many viewers, it became just another storyline. But what they didn't see was what it actually takes to go through something like that. The discipline, the mental strain, the lifestyle changes that don't stop after the surgery is over. This wasn't a quick fix. It was a complete reset. And while it did help him physically, it also brought a different kind of pressure. Because suddenly, people expected even more from him. He looked different. He acted more confident. He was stepping into a bigger role in the business. But internally, Corey was still dealing with loss, still processing the absence of his grandfather, and still trying to figure out who he was supposed to become without that guiding figure in his life. And that kind of transition isn't something you just move past. It stays with you. It shapes your decisions. And sometimes it pushes you into directions you didn't expect. Because when you combine grief, pressure, and constant public attention, things don't always go smoothly. In fact, sometimes they start to unravel. And for Corey, the next chapter of his life wouldn't be about growth or success. It would be about mistakes. Real ones, public ones, the kind that don't just affect your image, but force you to confront who you really are. And once that starts,
At this point, things in Corey Harrison's life were already more complicated than most viewers realized. He had lost his grandfather, taken on more responsibility, transformed his body, and continued to live under constant public scrutiny. From the outside, it still looked like progress, but behind that image, cracks were starting to form. And they didn't stay hidden for long. Because when your life plays out in the public eye, mistakes don't stay private. They become headlines. And for Corey, that's exactly what happened. In 2023, news broke that he had been arrested in Las Vegas on suspicion of driving under the influence. It wasn't just another small incident. It immediately spread across media outlets, putting him back into the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. For many people watching from the outside, it was easy to judge. How does someone with that kind of success mess up like this? But reality is never that simple, because moments like that don't just appear out of nowhere. They build up over time. Pressure, expectations, personal struggles that aren't visible on camera, and eventually, something gives. The arrest didn't just affect his public image, it forced a shift in how people saw him. He wasn't just the confident Big Hoss anymore. Now, he was someone dealing with very real consequences. And the truth is, situations like this don't just go away overnight. They stay attached to your name, they follow you, and they force you to either change or spiral further. At the same time, Corey's personal life was also going through instability. His relationships weren't holding together the way many expected. His first marriage had already ended, and his second marriage didn't last either. And while people often dismiss celebrity relationships as temporary or superficial, that doesn't mean they don't leave damage behind. Divorce isn't just a headline, it's a reset, emotionally, mentally, and sometimes financially. For someone already dealing with public pressure, business expectations, and personal loss, it adds another layer of weight. And the problem with weight like that is, it doesn't disappear. It builds and builds until something bigger happens. And unfortunately for the Harrison family, that something bigger came in a way no one was prepared for. In 2024, tragedy struck again. Adam Harrison, Corey's brother, passed away from a fentanyl overdose. This wasn't a rumor, this wasn't speculation. It was real, and it hit the family hard. For the public, it was shocking news, but for the family, it was devastating. Because losing someone to something like that brings a completely different kind of pain. It's sudden, it's complicated, and it leaves behind questions that don't have easy answers. For Corey, this wasn't just another difficult moment. This was personal. This was family. And when something like that happens, everything else becomes secondary. Business, television, public image, none of it matters the same way anymore. And while fans continued to talk about the future of Pawn Stars, behind the scenes, the reality was very different. The Harrison family wasn't just dealing with a show. They were dealing with loss. Real loss. And grief doesn't follow a schedule. It doesn't care about filming dates. It doesn't wait for cameras to turn off. It changes people. Sometimes quietly, sometimes drastically, and sometimes in ways that others don't immediately understand. For Corey, everything that had been building over the years, pressure, expectation, mistakes, personal struggles, now collided with something far heavier. And at that point, it wasn't just about bouncing back anymore. It was about surviving what comes next. Because after something like that, life doesn't go back to normal. It shifts. And when it shifts, people make decisions they never would have considered before. Some step away, some try to start over, and some completely change direction. And that's exactly where Corey's story was heading next. Away from what people expected. Away from the image built on television.
After everything that had happened, the pressure, the mistakes, the loss, Corey Harrison reached a point where something had to change, because staying on the same path was no longer an option. From the outside, many people assumed that Corey would eventually settle back into his role, take over more responsibility, and continue building the legacy of the gold and silver pawn shop. That was the expectation. That was the story everyone believed. But reality started moving in a completely different direction. Reports began to surface that Corey had been spending more time away from Las Vegas, less involved in the day-to-day operations of the shop, less visible in the way fans were used to. And then something even more unexpected came out. He had been living part-time in Tulum, Mexico. For some people, that might sound like a simple lifestyle change. But in Corey's situation, it meant something bigger. Because this wasn't just about travel. This was about distance. Distance from the business, distance from the environment he grew up in, and possibly distance from everything that had been weighing on him for years. At the same time, uncertainty started growing around the future of Pawn Stars itself. For years, the show had been one of the biggest reality TV successes on the History Channel. It turned a family-run pawn shop into a global brand. It made Corey a recognizable figure around the world. But nothing in television lasts forever, and behind the scenes, things were shifting. There were reports that the show didn't have a new contract secured, that production had slowed down, that the future wasn't as certain as it once seemed. For Corey, this created a strange situation, because the very thing that built his identity was no longer guaranteed. And when that kind of stability disappears, people start asking different questions. What do I do next? Who am I outside of this? Do I even want the same life anymore? Those aren't easy questions, especially when your entire adult life has been tied to one place, one business, and one public image. But before Corey could fully answer those questions, something happened that once again changed everything. In early 2026, while in Tulum, Corey was involved in a serious motorcycle accident. And this wasn't minor. He suffered multiple broken ribs, the kind of injuries that don't just heal quickly, the kind that force you to stop, to slow down, to face reality in a way you can't ignore. For someone who had already been dealing with emotional stress, public scrutiny, and major life changes, this was another heavy blow.
But it didn't end there, because shortly after, information started circulating about the financial side of the situation. Medical costs, recovery expenses, unexpected bills, even discussions about needing help to cover everything. For many fans, this was shocking. How does someone from a hit show like Pawn Stars end up in that situation? But again, reality doesn't always match perception. Television success doesn't mean unlimited security. Fame doesn't guarantee stability. And when multiple challenges hit at once, legal issues, personal loss, career uncertainty, and physical injury, things can become overwhelming very quickly. For Corey, this moment wasn't just about recovery. It was a crossroads, physically, mentally, and financially. Because when everything slows down like that, you're left alone with your thoughts, with your decisions, with everything that led you to that point. And sometimes, that's when the biggest changes begin. Not when things are going well, but when everything forces you to stop and reconsider who you are, what you want, and what you're willing to leave behind. At this stage, Corey's life no longer looked anything like the version people had been watching for years. The confident, fast-talking big hoss making deals in Las Vegas had been replaced by someone dealing with real consequences, real pain, and real uncertainty. And the biggest question now wasn't about the show, or the business, or the legacy. It was much simpler than that. What happens next? Because after everything he's been through, there are only two directions left. Either he rebuilds, or he disappears from the life everyone once knew him for.
So where does that leave Corey Harrison now? After everything, the pressure, the expectations, the public mistakes, the personal losses, the accident, and the uncertainty surrounding his future, the answer isn't as simple as people might expect. Because this isn't just a story about a reality TV star anymore. It's about what happens after the spotlight starts to fade. For years, Corey was known as Big Hoss, the confident, sometimes stubborn, but always determined figure inside Pawn Stars. A guy who argued, negotiated, learned, and slowly earned his place in a business built by generations before him. But that version of him was only part of the picture, because real life doesn't follow a script, and it definitely doesn't care about expectations. The truth is, Corey today is someone who has been forced to confront reality in a way most people never have to, publicly, repeatedly, and without the option to hide from it. The loss of Richard Harrison changed the structure of the family. The death of Adam Harrison changed the emotional core of it. The legal issues changed how the public saw him. The accident changed his physical reality. And the uncertainty around Pawn Stars changed his future. When you put all of that together, you don't get a clean comeback story. You get a complicated situation. And that's what makes this moment so important. Because this is the part of the story where there are no guarantees, no script, no predictable ending. From the outside, some people still assume he'll return, take control, and rebuild everything exactly the way it was before. But if you look at everything that's happened, that's not realistic. Too much has changed, not just around him, but inside him. And that's something viewers often forget. People evolve, especially after loss, especially after failure, especially after being forced to stop and rethink everything. It's very possible that Corey doesn't want the same life anymore. Not the constant filming, not the pressure of running a business under a global spotlight, not the expectations tied to a name that carries decades of history. And if that's true, then the biggest shift in his story isn't the tragedy, it's the decision that comes after it. Does he return to that world, or does he leave it behind completely? Because walking away would mean letting go of everything people associate him with, but staying means continuing in a life that has already taken a heavy toll. And that's not an easy choice. There's also another reality that people don't always want to admit. Not every story ends with a perfect comeback. Sometimes, the real outcome is quieter, less dramatic, more personal. Maybe Corey rebuilds, not as a TV personality, but as someone living a completely different life. Maybe he steps back, focuses on himself, his health, and his future away from cameras. Or maybe he finds a way to return, but not as the same big hoss people remember. Because after everything he's been through, that version of him doesn't fully exist anymore. And that's the part of the story that almost nobody talks about. The transformation that isn't visible. The internal shift. The version of a person that changes when life hits them again and again until they're forced to either break or adapt. So when people ask, what happened to Corey Harrison? The real answer isn't one event. It's everything combined.
It's years of pressure, moments of success, public mistakes, private pain, and decisions that are still unfolding. And maybe the most honest way to look at it is this: Corey Harrison's story isn't over. It's just no longer the one people expected to watch. Because behind the fame, behind the business, behind the name Big Hoss, there's just a person trying to figure out what comes next. And this time, there are no cameras to guide the narrative, only real life, and whatever he chooses to do with it.